So recently I started getting a little worried about some of the features I was adding to the writing software that I develop. And the reason I'm worried is actually because I think they are extremely powerful, but that can be not necessarily the best thing depending on your personality. So for me, I have trouble with perfectionism. So if the tools that I'm working with, I realized, allow me to change things a lot, it actually makes it more difficult for me to move forward and finish what I'm working on. So, a few examples: I develop software, and software is often developed with a version control, version tracking, so you can see everything you've ever saved all the way through history, and you can branch off and make new versions and see how that works out, and then merge those together if you want. And that power is extremely useful, but it sometimes can make it so that I have too much freedom to modify things without fear, and that's a personal issue. So like I'm trying to say that if your tools are very malleable and you have perfectionist tendencies, you need to be careful about that. Well, you don't need to do anything, but I need to be careful about that. And if you're like me, then you probably should too as well. So that's something to keep in mind as to your choice of tool. So if you're a writer and part of the thing that you like about a certain writing platform is its flexibility, that could be a good thing if you are able to have a sense of when something's good enough and move forward. But it can be a real trap if you are a perfectionist. And another example of that is the language that I'm using to write the latest version of Ginkgo, the writing software, is actually extremely powerful in that it can help you rewrite things and move things around very easily. So in the language that was written in before, JavaScript, things ended up being very tightly wound together, and changing the whole structure of the code was difficult. With the new language that I'm writing in, which is Elm, it's much, much easier to do, which means that I ended up rewriting my rewrite, I don't know, 4-5 times. I don't think it necessarily was a bad thing because I was trying to work through different problems each time I did it. But it is something to be aware of if you are a perfectionist. The tools you choose could be a reflection of that need to be able to control everything. Another example is I liked to draw. I say liked because I still like it, but I don't do it very much. And I liked painting when I was younger, but at some point I got a graphic tablet, and that was great for me as a perfectionist because now I had undo, I could, like different layers, and I could have a lot more control. But without fixing my perfectionist tendencies, that was actually a drawback. So whereas if it was like watercolors or where I would just be forced to keep moving, right? Because I had that tool and that tendency, it was a drawback for me. So that's just something I wanted to bring up, and something that has been on my mind, being that I'm developing a writing tool. I'm giving it more flexibility, and flexibility has always been important to me. I wanted to see, to just talk about this, see if you have any commentary on this. Is too much flexibility sometimes a bad thing? Now, I've seen, for example, writing software that specifically designed to prevent that. For example, there's a mode where it's typewriter mode and you can only type forward and you can't go back. Or there's Write or Die, which is an app where you have a timer and you have to keep writing a certain number of words, or it just erases your work. And those things are crazy, but if for your perfectionists, like you sometimes have to try these things. But is it possible that a tool is too flexible for you? And if so, would you be better off with something less malleable until you're able to get over the need for things to be perfect? So just a thought, and I'd like to know what you think, or if you've seen examples of that in any of your work or any of the tools you use, and the choices that you have for your tools, and just what your thoughts are on that. And I'm going to do more thinking about it. I do think that it's important to have the flexibility that I'm building into the app, but I want to make sure that it's only there when you really need it and it's not in your face, so that you're not always thinking about all the possible ways that your story or your thesis or whatever can be organized, but that you are focused on what's in front of you. But that if you do need to reorganize things or go back in history and try a new version, you can. So those are my thoughts on that. I'd love to hear if questions, comments on that, and if you had any experiences similar to that. That's it for me.